Panorama Consulting Group brings you Confronting the Crisis, COVID-19, the role of change management and response and recovery, with Rick Platts and Christy Trinder.
Hello, and thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. We're here to help provide resources and advice to help leaders and organizations through this very difficult time. As you know, it's unprecedented. It's something that nobody actually saw coming, and the connection to change management is unparalleled to what we do on a day-to-day basis, but it's really like change on steroids. There's a lot of unknowns and variables out there, and as we all, I think, know in our own personal worlds and our business worlds, that this might just be the beginning. And really at Panorama, we're here to help you step up and cope with the challenges that you're facing today and those that we're going to be facing in the future when we reach into what is being referred to as the new normal.
Definitely, Rick. And, we really today want to create hope amid this major disruption. We are looking at change management in a different light. Rick, that when we go and we do training for leadership, what we do is we ask them to actually focus on themselves first. So that's what we're going to encourage you to do today, is take some time, listen to some of our suggestions, giving some tools and some knowledge of how we can get through this crazy time. If you think about where we were just a month ago, how things were at that point, we had at work, we had a strategy, we had a mission, we had a focus. I always say, that people come into work with a helmet on and they know what's expected of them. And what's happened since then and the way this looks now is it's chaotic. Everything is changing. Clients, their needs are changing. We're having to ourselves here at Panorama Consulting pivot the way that we are offering services. And so it's a very interesting time for us.
It really is, Christy. It's a great point because, you think back to when you probably did your planning sessions late last year, moving into the new year, and your hopes and aspirations, your goals, your strategies. And, overnight by the early March, that all got blown up and you had to do a quick shift. Both for yourselves, your company, your supply chain, your customers, your employees, most importantly, and how do you cope with this? And it literally does change every day and almost every minute.
So Rick and I have been spending a lot of time researching, attending webinars, listening to podcasts, and we listened to a ProSci webinar the other day, and it was regarding the response to the virus. And they are looking at this in 3 different phases. And so, if you think about phase 1, it's really our personal response to the virus itself. So, it's our self-isolation. Rick came in with a, mask on, having to wear that mask when we're outside. And, someone said the other day that it's not social distancing, it's actually physical distancing. We physically have to stay apart, but we don't socially have to stay apart. So, navigating through what that looks like for us, people laugh, and there's a lot of memes and things on social media that says, why do we all of a sudden have to start washing our hands? We should have been doing those things already.
That's right.
So again, it's just that phase 1 of, helping ourselves, dealing with it ourselves. And then, Rick, what are the other phases that they talked about?
Well, it's like the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and it's that core base level of taking care of your family and yourself, as well as your coworkers, your employees in this case too, but it's really hunkering down and making sure that those bases are covered. I know you have children. I have older parents and older relatives that we're having to take care of and do shopping for and make the deliveries. And I know you're balancing both kids now at home from school as well as your professional life and what you're trying to do. So there's a lot of that. In that phase 1 is that response level, is that we got to cover that base level to make sure we can take that next step into the next phase. What's the organizational response to the COVID-19 outbreak? And it's really making sure that we're excelling as a virtual employee. And then if you're a leader in your organization, it's helping set them up to be able to do that. There's lots of things out on the media now around using things like Zoom or Microsoft Teams, and actually trying to interact with one another, bringing tools into the homes for people to be able to do their jobs better, and empowering those virtual teams and the networks that go with that, and helping people stay connected. And one of the things we've heard a lot, and that we actually do here too, is using the video so that we stay connected in a face-to-face format as well. And we're getting to see a lot more what people's houses look like as a result. And then the other part is the rapid resource redeployment. I mean, that's really part of this, is where do we have to put the people in the right places to do the right thing. And so in addition to the tools, it's how do we actually put them in a place to still do their job if it's essential or not as much essential. How do we deploy those resources? And then how are we communicating with our customers and understanding what they're going through too, and how to best interact with them.
Yeah, and we've definitely here at Panorama Consulting, we've done that ourselves. We do have the ability to work from home, but now that we're home on a daily basis, we've had to set up whiteboards, and we've had to set up tripods, and we've had to do things ourselves to just manage this new world that we are living in also, and also making that connection with our clients. Again, as Rick commented, that we're using the video, Zoom, Teams a lot, just to make sure that we're connecting face to face with people still.
That's right. So if you think again back to when we set this up, it's phase one was the response, phase two is the organizational response, and then phase three is really that looking forward. What's the future look like when we come out of this? How are we going to be working with each other? How are we going to work with our customers? How are you going to interact with your clients and customers? And really starting to shape that new future state, and what's that going to look like, and what is that new normal, and how soon do we get back to being able to interact more closely with people? A lot of our businesses travel to be face to face with our customers. It's highly effective. They want us on site. It helps us better understand what they're doing, and so how are we going to navigate those roads down into the summer and into the fall and into next year?
Definitely. And, as we talk about how this virus has changed our life, obviously we want to make sure and, look at what this new future state is. Part of change management is change is emotional. So again, think back to where I said, you wear your helmet into work every day, it's expected of you. When someone says, hey, there's a change, there is an emotional reaction to that. Typically it's shock, denial, anger, bargaining. What we're learning through this new pandemic is that there's a new cycle that we're going through, and it's the grief cycle. Everybody is grieving in a different way, grieving the loss of coming into work, grieving the loss of a job for a lot of people. And so we're having to cycle through that grief process also. The goal of change management is to really give you tools and a methodology, something that can pull you out of that dip, the lower production dip, the lower, emotional dip, and it brings you out of that depression, and it brings you into an acceptance, support of this change, support of our new reality. Someone said the other day, I can't wait to go back to what we used to have. And it's like, we're not going to ever go back to what we used to have. We've created a new norm with our environment today. And so by having change management, by coping with change in a better manner, in an easier manner, we're able to get out of those depression, that grief stage.
That's right.
And again, really focus on that hope. What can we do out of this? And that's what Rick and I are going to focus on, moving forward, is to talk about what we can do now and how we can make this a successful transition.
That's right. And you see that, and hope's the key word in that, Christy. That's excellent. And that, as you think of that change curve and the dip is, we've all had to take some time to digest this. We see this in our practice every day when companies are going through change in a new project or a new ERP or whatever's happening. This one's just on steroids, and it affects everything about our lives. And what you're starting to see as we've getting deeper into it is that movement out, that acceptance and that support and stabilization and the hope, and creating that hope for where we can go. And you see companies turning on a dime about, if you're a restaurant, and doing the carry out and aggressively going out and trying to help people. You see it with companies making the face masks and the 3D printing. You see it with, like today I heard they're accepting ski goggles. So a ski store here in Colorado is donating ski goggles to a hospital as a backup for eye protection. So you see a lot of people coming together. You see this in our history through other major events that we had, be it the world wars or the Spanish flu or other things, 9/11, all those things where we actually can show that we can come together as a country, and how people can actually find opportunity to help support one another and help us become more stabilized, which is that, again, that higher level on a change curve as to where we want to go and what we want to be successful.
Absolutely. So as we talk about, next steps, what can we do now? One of the things that we're learning in all this is you're going to have to adapt quickly. We are getting new facts. We are getting new evidence all the time. Everything is changing. So what we want to encourage you is to make sure that the information that you're getting is from a trusted source. We all know if you go on social media right now, there's a lot of things being posted. There's a lot of information that isn't necessarily true. And so if you start making decisions on some of that information, it can actually, cause issues. So just remember, don't be afraid to change quickly, but make sure that you're basing your changes, your decisions on actual facts and evidence.
Yeah, and the other thing is, in addition to that, is to take care of yourself throughout all this, both your family and your personal self, be it sleep, be it exercise. And what's really underlying this is the mental health. And then next, most important is your team and their mental health. And if you can't take care of yourself, you're not going to really be strong enough to take care of anything else in life. So first and foremost, to make sure that, again, back to that Maslow example, make sure that core base level is being attended to and taken care of. And be aware of actions and not just words. A lot of times in our practice, we talk about the unintended consequences of what a leader might say. For instance, they might say, "Oh, we're going to be more efficient," and what the receiving person hears is, "Oh, I'm not going to have a job." So be aware of your actions and maybe the unintended consequences of what you say, or the intended consequences. So be mindful of what you say, and not just your words, but through your actions as well. And obviously, and I think everybody's doing this from what I'm observing personally, is that make employee safety your number one priority. Here at Panorama, we went virtual just overnight. We got the tools in place to help people be effective overnight, and it was paramount in our leadership's approach to this to make sure that all of us on the team we're making sure we're taking care of ourselves. And the other thing, which Christy mentioned earlier, was those check-ins with each other and use video. She and I and a couple other people on our change team, we meet every day for just a half an hour, just a video check-in. Sometimes it's about work, sometimes it's work and a little bit about social, and just making sure everybody's doing okay. And that's really important at this point in time, because everybody's a little on edge, and it's a new normal.
Definitely. And, it was interesting. My family is, not close by. And so we'll talk on the phone, but we actually on Sunday, we Zoomed together. So we all sat in a room and we got to see each other and talk to each other.
Yeah.
I've done the same with girlfriends. Rick, I know that you had something interesting in your neighborhood the other night that you guys did.
Oh, yeah. Our neighbor did a little concert on their porch, and everybody stood at least 10 feet away. But they set up their keyboard and a ukulele on the front porch, and just everybody brought a glass of wine and just enjoyed each other's company from afar, just to kind of reconnect and make sure everybody was being taken care of. I just saw too on the news where Matthew McConaughey hosted a virtual bingo. He was apparently going to go to some senior home and do it in person back in September. He committed, and obviously things changed, so he hosted it virtually on Zoom, and there was probably 30 or 40 people playing bingo with him, for that interaction. Yeah. And it was great.
That's awesome. I think we're in a place now that we're getting very creative with how we are handling our new norm. The other thing that we want to talk about is, just be clear and transparent. Everybody's lives are at risk. And I think that you see that on the news a lot, is they're attempting to be clear and transparent. We just got extended a stay-at-home order for the rest of the month. And again, it is for a reason. So just be, as you speak and as you make decisions, be transparent in those. Share what you know, and be honest with what you don't know. We have in change management, when change is happening, we'll have leadership come in and say, I don't know how to answer this question. And I always tell them that's okay. Tell them you don't know the answer, but when you do, you will let them know, or maybe it's an opportunity for you to communicate, to brainstorm. We do a lot of brainstorming with change management, with our clients, with even just us as a group. How can we handle this? How can we answer this? How can we communicate this? So really just sitting back and being very clear. And again, if you don't know the answer, it's okay to say, I don't know.
Right. And what you earn from that transparency is that respect and devotion from your team, which if you think about it, as you start to come out of this into that phase 3 and what's the new normal, well, a lot of it's morale and retention of those people. So, or if you had to let people go or furlough them, that you're in a place to bring them back, and it's a place they want to go back to. Just because you're honest and forthright up front pays dividends long term. So it's as much important today, but it also is, how does that help you, from a long term standpoint as an organization?
Definitely. And, Rick just reminded me, it really shows a personal side too. It's a personal side where you can connect with, whether it be on a personal situation, a friend, a family member, but also here at work, giving them an opportunity to see you. We talk, don't drink the Kool-Aid. Don't give them an answer that you think they want to hear. Actually be honest in that.
That's right. Yeah. And be yourself. The other thing that then obviously spins off of that is the communication side. It's a big part of change management is not only what you communicate, but how and to whom, and understanding your stakeholders and your segments that are involved with that. And first and foremost in the communication is they need to be able to trust what they're hearing. And more than anything, if there's any doubt, over communicate. Yeah, I think I'd rather hear somebody say, all right, I got it, versus nobody ever told me, and especially now. So, and especially because things are changing so quickly. So give yourself permission to change what you're communicating in the information that's there. Remind people that you might need to change based on dynamics and what's going on. That happens in our company here too, because things are happening very quickly as to how we're interacting with our clients and our customers and what those customers are going through. So that changes our level of engagement and what we do and how we work with them. And the other thing is to make sure you're being consistent and intentional. Just don't go dark for days at a time. If you're going to set up a cadence that's reasonable, let's say you're going to do 3 times a week, then make sure you're consistent with that and be intentional about what that message is. Maybe have a stock agenda that you do. It's like background, purpose, next steps. That kind of traditional format is to give people context of what it is that you're going to talk about in a consistent way, so it's received in a consistent way and it doesn't come across as just being all over the map. That they're going to look to you to be organized and kind of having your stuff together, frankly, as to, okay, what are we doing? And they're looking to you to help provide that guidance and some sanity and professionalism that goes with that too. So as much as we're saying be yourself, but you still want to make sure you're being professional in how you approach that.
Definitely. And we always say that, consistency, as Rick just said, is so important. Research shows that you should say the same thing 5 to 7 times in different ways. It takes 5 to 7 times for someone to hear what you've said, understand what you've said, and then actually take it in and have it be a part of them, be a part of their future communications. So again, we will talk even throughout this podcast about the same thing a couple of times just to reiterate the consistency of that message and the importance of that message. During this time, just know that this is all unprecedented. I mean, here at Panorama Consulting, we are facing this just like you are, having to pivot, having to, redo or change how we're doing things. We always talk in change management that the positives, celebrating the successes, seeing that hope, acknowledging the good things is so incredibly important. You can get really bogged down by the grief cycle, what you've lost through all of this, but we are seeing so many amazing things. Rick mentioned the neighborhood concert. Thank you. The other night, what we did in my neighborhood is we actually had a karaoke party for the kids. My kids 6 feet away met children on the block that we hadn't ever met before. Making those connections with neighbors that we haven't. And Rick, I want you to tell people what you did recently for the hospital.
Oh, yeah. We recently, my daughter-in-law works as an ICU nurse, and obviously they're under a lot of stress and what's going on. So we actually made 30 breakfast burritos, and we're getting ready to do some more this weekend and deliver them to them. And just to give them a break and something nutritious and something different and save a little money out of their pocket, they're all individually wrapped. They can just take and go. The other thing that we do is, like I mentioned earlier, is with the older relatives, we're going grocery shopping. We make a call on Thursday night and get their orders and go shopping and then deliver it to their front porch and sanitize everything. And there's something out there going around the hashtag of Corona kindness, and we're seeing that everywhere. So in this context too, I mean, these are personal anecdotes, but think about what you can do internally too with your teams, and to show that and make sure that not only do they do some things within their community, but also recognize those acts of kindness and show your human face throughout all this.
Definitely.
So the other thing to keep in mind, and we mentioned it earlier, is that there's a lot of stress, and as soon as and you can't hide it, and the mental health is huge. There's mental health implications that this is going to cause, and again, back to how their families are dealing with it, their jobs. They might have been furloughed, they might have been laid off. If you're a business owner, how are you going to make payroll? How do you keep your customers happy? How do you take care of your own family and make sure things are in a place where when we come out of this, that you can still be viable and understand what that new normal looks like. There's the financial health of the organization you have to think of. There's new risks, more pervasive than ever, and that whole anxiety around the uncertainty, and like Christy mentioned earlier, around that grieving. That's a new element that's actually been added within the Kubler-Ross model on the change curve. It was actually mentioned in a Harvard Business Review article here about 2.5 weeks ago. That grief is the new one there, and people are grieving because this hit us so quickly. It wasn't something that we got to plan for or anticipate. It just came out of nowhere in context, right, of how things normally work. And it was an overwhelming loss of what we knew as the status quo, and it's really taking control of us both on a micro level as well as a macro level. So there's lots of stuff going on here and lots of dynamics that are happening. So it's really important to be mindful of your own mental health and the stresses as well as what your team is going through. And it doesn't hurt to be a little empathetic along the way too, and understanding that people need to get through this. And the other thing that we always learn in change management is different people are going to absorb it different ways. So it isn't a one size fits all. So it's really important to make sure, not only for yourselves, but let's say your frontline supervisors and managers, to help coach them when they're working with their teams. This is new territory for a lot of those folks, and they need to be given the tools and advice and insights, much like we're sharing today, to make sure that they're managing their teams effectively in a way that's going to make them feel good, not only about themselves, but about the groups that they're in charge of. So it's one thing to hear it from you, but it's even more important on how they hear it from their direct line supervisors.
Yeah, definitely. And we want to encourage you at this time too to also look for opportunities. So, with everybody transitioning from coming into an office to working from home, how can you make that easier? How can you help them be successful and continue to be successful in those jobs? As Rick was just talking about, your leaders are typically walking by the desks and saying, hey, how are you today? And having that check-in face-to-face, now we can't. So encouraging them to find creative ways. Rick mentioned earlier, we're meeting on a daily basis. It's just a daily check-in. We start with work, get work out of the way, and then we do some personal conversations and make sure everybody's doing okay. Panorama Consulting just got us new headphones so that we have an easier time. We're not holding our phones. Sometimes our computers don't work, allowing us to make sure that when we're attending client meetings that we have the resources, the technology that we need. This really is an opportunity to think outside the box. It's going back to that pivot again. How can we be successful in this new environment? How can you grow your business? We are seeing so many companies that were doing something one way, they're doing something totally different. There are companies that are flourishing now that may not have been before, just because they're thinking outside the box. So again, it really gives you an opportunity at this time to grow, to expand, to do something different. And so we're just really encouraging you to look at those possibilities.
Yeah. And to build on that too, because a lot of our clients are in manufacturing, and a lot of the examples we're giving are more on a professional level too, being able to have ability to work from home. And sometimes in those cases, they don't have that ability because everything's happening on the factory floor. So being mindful of what those workers have who are doing that work, and how are we taking care of sanitation? How are we keeping the machines running? How are we creating the distance stuff that we talked about, the social distancing? How do you protect them and keep them safe while you keep the machines running? And then we also have clients too where English is a second language at best. So making sure you're mindful of how you're communicating to those folks who maybe don't speak English, and also then how are you going to communicate with them in a way where it isn't just email that's the most effective way. So you have to think through some creative ways to how to do that in the scheduling, and then keeping them feel safe too, and making sure that the work's still getting done as much as you can. So the other things to think about when you stop and say, okay, some steps to take now and in the days ahead is, and this is a little bit of a recap of some of the things we've been talking about, but it's really about leadership has to be out in front. It's paramount in change management. If Christy and I walk into a situation and a project doesn't have leadership support that's visible and supportive of the project team, and the sponsors aren't engaged, we actually recommend don't doing it, because it's not going to be a priority for those other folks then too who you're dependent on getting this done. You're just going to set up your IT team or somebody to fail because they're not going to get the support they need. So as much as it matters in those kinds of contexts, it really matters now is that leaders need to be out in front. You might think about creating a crisis solutions team or whatever name's appropriate for you that's comprised of leaders, but also pull in your subject matter experts. They have a lot to say. They know what's going on. They have a lot of great ideas. This is a great chance to increase that level of engagement at those people, and you'll see where the cream starts to rise. Some of those people given the opportunity to participate and be part of the solution can really help get you through this difficult time, and you might find some real heroes coming out of this too for the long term. Make sure you understand that preferred sender of the information beyond senior leadership, which you alluded to earlier, giving those tools and talking points, FAQs, information, just like we do in a project, to those frontline supervisors, and how that information is getting out. As Christy mentioned, the 5 to 7 times. Are there different venues to do that, be it flyers, postings in common areas, talking points for stand-up meetings, those kinds of things. And then as you work through this, think about some goals and a clear path forward on what you want to get done. And certainly in these times, they're probably more short-term and medium-term goals. And frankly, they probably aren't a lot, but because in some cases you might be on survival mode. But it's really how do we pivot and turn and set some goals as to what we want to do. And what that's going to do is help not only the organization, it's going to help that leadership team come together too. So it's kind of the bullet versus shotgun approach. And so let's have a couple bullets that are going in the right direction versus everybody just running and trying to figure out something in a panic mode and running around in circles, and you create a spaghetti string. So it's really important to take that time where it's hard to focus and mentally be engaged to take that step back and do that. And then also solicit input from employees and customers. A big part of what we do is in our practice is focus groups, surveys, what have you, at the start of a project around readiness, engagement. This would be a great chance to actually get that input from employees, maybe even do some small focus groups and solicit that input about what people are feeling, and understand where their points of view are, and what do they want to know more of, what are their fears and aspirations and hopes coming out of this, as well as your customers and what they're going through, and how can you help them better. And then, certainly it goes without saying is that you need to be flexible to these changing dynamics. So, if not daily, sometimes hourly, and certainly within every week, there's something else that's going on. But as we get through this deeper and deeper, we're going to start to see where that future path might go and help us extend our thinking beyond just tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. Rick, you mentioned, developing goals. Sit down right now. The goals that you once had a month ago are probably different than the goals you might have now. So when he says sit down and develop those, think outside the box, our new norm? How can those goals be effective? And then we really encourage in change management, you don't just sit down and write a mission or goals, but that you follow up with action steps. So if you have those goals, then write action steps to support those goals. We talk about metrics a lot. How are those metrics and what are those now? How can they be achieved? But really putting those in writing and making sure that, everyone is aware of those. And again, that new pivot and what that looks like for you personally and even, at work. We encourage you to, again, gather relevant facts, move quickly. It is a time in our life where we can't sit. We can't wait for things to change because we don't have that opportunity to. We're going to have to be willing to change on the fly. This is a perfect example of change and, dealing with it on a very quick basis. Again, taking care of yourself before you take others. Really take ownership of what you're doing. Give it to your employees. Again, we suggest as you sit down and write goals or, a potential new mission or vision for your environment, ask your employees what they think, talk to them. We have done that here at Panorama Consulting. Our managing directors have come to us and said, hey, we want your ideas. How can we transfer? How can we transform? How can we do something different than what we've been doing? So we've done that as a team, and it's been pretty amazing what we've heard and the ideas that people have. We talk a lot about doing things on video. You're sending a lot more emails than you would normally because you don't have those, face-to-face conversations. Be present in that, as you're having those meetings. I know it's so easy when you're working from home to be sidetracked. It is for me. I've got kids who are, on videos talking to their teachers. At the same time, I'm having meetings with either my team or, with a client. And it's really having to stay focused, stay motivated, and make sure that I'm accomplishing the tasks personally. So we just really encourage you to continue to be present through all of this.
Well said. And that really ties back to your core values as an organization too. This is a real great opportunity to help let those manifest themselves in real time and through your actions and not just the words on the wall. So if you have things like integrity and excellence and trust and honesty, these are the time for those values to shine through and help everybody understand that. And responsibility, like Christy mentioned about owning it, is giving people the opportunity to own part of those solutions, own part of those ideas and innovations and stuff. So it really helps an organization if you're grounded in some core values to lean on those to your advantage. So the other things on some steps to keep in mind as you move forward is be mindful of who is and who should deliver messages depending on the level of severity or importance or strategic impacts. So for instance, if it's something about furloughs or layoffs, that certainly should come at a very high level. But then if there's information that has to trickle down to managers and how that works with their teams to make sure that those steps are included. But also if it's celebrating some victories and some new innovation and celebrate some of the things that we're starting to do as an organization to come out of this, make sure you understand who's going to say that and how and when. Acknowledge what you and your team are doing to get through this. Like we've shared a lot of anecdotal stories today on this podcast from our own lives is, capture those in a bottle and share those within teams. It doesn't necessarily have to be across the entire organization, but it's, again, let's say it's a manufacturing organization is within a functional group, make sure there's a forum there to share some of those stories that become inspiration for others to do well, to be well, and act well, and actually get them to be supportive. And frankly, it can bring a team closer together because you get to know people at a different level. Because a lot of times we leave our personal selves at the door when we walk in, and this is a chance to really see people in a different light, which can be work wonders for you long term. And stay focused on the solutions team and everyone else. So if you have that crisis solutions team in play, make sure that solutions team is being focused and give them the permission to focus on that and maybe get rid of some of their day-to-day duties that they've used to have or diminish some of those and really put all their energy behind what can be done here to reach out to those others who might have inputs and influence on it, but let a smaller core group be able to work on those areas that are going to be most impactful for the organization. And make sure you also have clarified your roles and decision processes internally. Make sure people know who's on first, what's on second, and make sure that you're monitoring external information sources like the CDC, Center for Disease Control, and the World Health Organization, what's happening at the macro level, but then also at your local level, be it your governor or your if it's a mayoral type of a situation, whatever, what's happening from the government side of things. Also making sure that your company standard operating procedures are well in place. Make sure you understand what your vacation, sick pay, and FMLA looks like, what does short-term disability look like, how are you handling time off, and making sure that that's consistent throughout the organization. Maybe there's a chance here to enhance that. That's happening in a lot of organizations, and how we're taking care of our people. And also think through contingency plans too, as to if we're going to have a work disruption, be it short-term or long-term, and how we're going to actually deal with that. And then, as we've said all along, is to make sure we communicate that and give regular and relevant updates, while also encouraging healthy hygiene and making sure your supply chain is well informed with what you're doing and how you're coping with things, and making sure you have communications with them.
Definitely. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and I really liked what this person said. They said, listen to the story you're telling yourself. So really sit back and think about how you're viewing your current situation and what story, because we can really get bogged down, and we talk about this in change management in general. When a change happens, we can get really bogged down in the negatives. But it's flipping that. It's twisting those words. It's, instead of seeing a risk, you're seeing an opportunity. Looking at those opportunities, and again, you've seen so much. We've talked about it over and over. Being creative. There's new relationships that have formed. There's new families. You see families outside walking together that you've never seen before. It really is an opportunity to tell your story in a different light.
That's right, because I've seen more sidewalk chalk in the last 2 weeks than I have in my whole life. And what's part of that too is that as people are going through those, when you think back to the change curve, is you need to also make sure it's okay for them to vent though, and go through that remorse and that grieving process before they can move out. So within every risk, and there is certainly an opportunity, and that's what you want to focus on, but don't be don't hold back, or have your people hold back on being able to share their fears that are going with this and that grief, because it's much like if you lose a loved one, and hopefully anybody listening to this hasn't had to go through that with this current pandemic, but it's how you cope with that to be able to move forward. So it's giving that forum, but don't let it linger there. So you acknowledge it, you give them the venue, but now, okay, great, but now what do we got to do? Because the sun's going to still come up tomorrow. Definitely.
And Rick and I do focus groups. And it really has been a way for us to learn about the company on a very intimate level. And so what we do in one of our breakouts is we look at risks and opportunities. Obviously it's typically project-based, but you can do this in a culture. You can do it in a very open environment. But we ask people to identify current risks that they see. You can sit down and you can say, here's the following risks that we see right now. But then you have to, as Rick just said, focus on those opportunities that come from those risks. And usually what we find in these focus groups is we have, a page of risks and we have 3 pages of opportunities. And it really gives you an idea of how things could really look and how successful things can be. Resistance is normal. It's natural. It's going to happen. You see that a lot. You see, here in Colorado, we're now recommended that we wear masks, and you see people who are still not wearing masks. There's been people that have been vocal about that and complaining, how come you don't have your mask? We really have to be careful how we are managing the resistance of things that we don't necessarily agree with, identifying that, figuring out where that root cause is, and then working through that resistance ourselves.
Well, the analogy to that is, if out here in Colorado, we like to ski a lot, for decades, nobody wore a helmet. It wasn't cool. If you wore a helmet, you were a dork. So now all of a sudden it's like you look around and you're looking at the idiots who don't wear a helmet. So that took a lot of time to make that transition. What we're doing now with this COVID-19 is it's on steroids. So like you said, with the face mask, it went to, well, we don't really need to. Even the CDC is like, maybe not. And then all of a sudden, but even in Asia, they were. So what was up? And all of a sudden, boom, you gotta wear one. So overnight, people are learning how to make them themselves. But now you're starting to notice those who aren't wearing them as opposed to those who were wearing them, just like the ski helmets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We really encourage you to, during this time, is talk to your customers, talk to your suppliers. We tend to forget about them in all of this, but they're also being impacted in this situation. Talk to them, see if there's something you can be doing different. Again, getting creative. How can you help them make their lives easier? We're hearing a lot of supplier issues. You can't find toilet paper. So now, when you find toilet paper online, you're calling your friend and saying, hey, toilet paper's on Amazon, grab it quick. Again, just reaching out on a personal level and a work level of where what do we need and how can we get it? And collaborate together. Really, it is paying attention to each other. We can't say anything more about communicate. It is so important during this time.
Yeah, and then we're trying to wrap this up for you today, but there is, we start to put a bow on some of these steps to take. Is most importantly, think about the distractions that might be in place and how you can remove those and reset your priorities as needed. Be as proactive as you can, because it's certainly in this situation, there's a little bit of reactivity that's happening because everything's coming at us so fast. But as much as you can be proactive, it's highly advisable to get out in front of things. And there are things in your control that you can be proactive about around communications, your own business, things like that. Be poised. I know that's kind of a different word that we don't always use, but it's really about how you come across, and people are going to be looking to you and your frontline managers as to how they're reacting to this, and people will respond in kind. Be honest, as we've said, be trustworthy, and if at all possible, focus on success metrics. How are we going to come out of this? And that could be success metric could be retention of employees, retention of customers. It could be retention of revenue, or the success metric, how soon are we going to recover on our revenue, and how soon are we able to hire people back, and how are we going to define that new normal from a metric standpoint. So wherever you can, it's that whole, if you can measure it, you can improve it, is to make sure we understand, and if you, as much as you can, apply some of those to it when you're setting up those goals.
We know that we have given you a lot of information. So what we want to do is just kind of end by saying, how can we help you now? Within Panorama Consulting, we can come in and we can help you in a lot of different ways. We don't ever do anything out of the box. It is never standard. Yes, we might have templates that we use, but we always tailor it towards your needs. So we can help you come in and we can facilitate. We can help coach your leaders through this time. We can help you to find, your new goals, strategy sessions. Can we help you build your crisis solutions team, or however you want to name it? We can come in, and we love doing stakeholder engagement. That is one of our most favorite things to do, is how can we get your stakeholders involved? Focus on your business leaders. Leadership is so critical to your business. We can come in and we can do surveys to see where things are at. We can come in and we can do sessions, virtually online. Obviously, we can't do it in person currently, but we can do all of that online for you and just really help you figure out where you're at and where your next steps could be.
That's right. And coming off of those efforts, like Christy was saying on the focus groups, those can be for one-on-ones, it can be three-on-ones, it can be small groups, to really give those people a private and confidential place to talk about what's going on and capture some of those things, both from a risk and opportunity. As she said, we usually get more opportunities, but if there's a culture of fear that they might be having, or their own grief, that a lot of times we can come in as a third party and really help extract that stuff by giving them the confidentiality that they might be seeking to do that. So our offerings are all available in part or a la carte or in full. The other things that come out of a lot of that learning will help us learn about a communication strategy, the types of materials you might need, talking points. It might be something where we reach out to your customers or your supply chain to get their feedback on your behalf. And some of this stuff is just because your resources are challenged too. So it isn't that you couldn't do it yourself, but a lot of times it's because, especially now, you just don't have enough arms and legs to go around. So we can come in and help you out on a short-term basis and help provide valuable information. We can also help doing coaching sessions for functional teams and management, as well as subject matter experts on a lot of the things we've talked about today. And we can also help facilitate change impact sessions. So if there's things that are going to be happening as you start to emerge from this, and what's that going to mean as an organization or from a functional standpoint, we can help that process as well. So lots of opportunity there that we would love to help you if at all possible. Thank you for joining us.
For more information on how Panorama can help your organization, please visit www.panorama-consulting.com or call us at 1-720-515-1377.